Hi, I'm Blake Rayhans.
And I'm Stacey Mallon.
And you are listening to the Optimized AF podcast.
We know life is hard. We're here to make it simple.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Optimized AF podcast. This is Blake.
And I'm Stacey, and mission accomplished. I got Blake to laugh right before we went on.
Well, I want to pull like a scene out of the movie Bad Boys where he looks at me and he's like, dude, you got to learn the words. Like, bad boys, bad, what you do. He's like, you got to learn the words.
Yeah.
You were trying to lip sync our intro, and you kind of
messed it up.
You fumbled a little bit.
I did.
Looked perfect to me.
It did? Well,
yeah.
You know, I'm kind of perfect.
Well, I mean,
just kidding. I'm so not perfect. Tom is with us again for a triple threat, and we are at the close of season 2 today. So you're going to get a little break from us. I know you might be sad about that.
Yeah, for those of you that need to reach for the tissues, we understand.
It's true, but
take a
we're
moment,
bringing you
let
a
that soak in.
Powerful episode today.
That's right. Something you can take with you this summer as things start to open up a little bit. Maybe you're going to go out and about. Maybe you're going to start to socialize a little more. And
Tom brought us this episode because it's funny. James and I were just talking about this when we went to We Love You Dutch Bros. And if you want to sponsor us, please do. I love the service at Dutch Bros. I love how excited and positive the kids are. It's amazing. But they default their tip to 25% on their little pad. And we noticed if you don't leave a tip, they do an X. And if you do leave a tip, and this may not be all Dutch Bros, this might be the one near us, they do a smiley. Now, that might be coincidence. It might be based on the person, but let's just be honest.
They
that
leave an
scares
X, like
me.
they write it on your cup?
No, like in the iPad. Like if you do no tip, they go whoop, whoop, they go no tip. If you do the tip, 20%, they do a smiley, which concerns me that the people in the back are watching what's coming on in the iPad. And maybe there's a variance in my coffee. But maybe not, Dutch Bros. Please set me straight. Send me all the Dutch Bros that you want. I will take it because I have 5
love
teenagers.
Dutch Bros too.
Do you?
And they are probably the only drive-through restaurant that I actually do tip.
Nice.
They have convinced me to do that. I think that this subject that we're going to talk about is probably one of the most provocative subjects because it confuses everybody.
Yes. So set the stage for us.
Well, I'm
Tom
going
Frank.
to make a proposition, and I think we really need to talk post or pre-COVID.
Yes.
Because I think COVID has brought a different dimension to tipping, but that's going to pass. We're going to get back to normal.
We are. But we're post-COVID, but yes, we'll give the disclaimer that people were more generous probably during COVID
For good
given
reasons.
the circumstances. And I think that just like during the holidays, I would equate it to during the holidays, people tend to be more generous. And I think that is completely appropriate, and whatever is in your heart, I think you should do. But we're talking about regular day-to-day.
Yeah, post-COVID, because I think a lot of people are making mistakes. All of us worked in the service industry.
Yeah.
And this is where I developed these ideas about tipping. And I am going to go out on a limb at the risk of getting in a lot of trouble and tell you that I believe the biggest problem with service in America is over-tipping.
I
Pause for dramatic effect.
agree.
And agree.
Yeah, and I agree. That's good.
Yeah.
That was good dramatic effect, but I think that I need to be very clear because nothing about what we're going to talk about is designed to give people permission to give bad tips.
Right.
Or to be a bad tipper. It's to be an informed tipper. And the idea is, I believe that the reason why over-tipping is the biggest problem with service is because service and tipping is truly capitalism at its best.
And you have some evidence, some research-based evidence you brought with us today, which I love data. So do you want to share a little bit of that too?
Let's talk about that. But first, I've been asking questions to servers going around the country, talking to servers about tipping and about service. And one of the questions that I've been asking is, what do you consider a good tip to waiters, right? And I always get a numerical answer. They always tell me a good tip is, 20% or more or whatever. They always have a number. And what I want people to understand is a good tip is more money than you would have given another server. Right? That's what a good tip is, and that's what the objective. When I was a waiter, that was my job, is to not just get 20% or more, because if you get 20% from me, you just got an ordinary tip. My job was to get people to give me more money, and we have to start with the assumption that you don't owe anybody anything as far as a tip. They don't owe you money. They don't owe you a tip. And even if they did, the money that they would owe you is less than you want them to give you. Right?
Yep.
Maybe you owe them 15%. Maybe you owe them 18%. But a good server is trying to get you to give them more money. Think about that. Imagine going to a grocery store and the cashier is great and she's bagging everything separate. She puts your meat separately and she puts everything perfectly.
That never happens, I wish.
Yeah, well, imagine. And she says, that'll be $100. Are you going to give her $120 and tell her to keep the rest as a tip? No, we don't do that. We do, but in the service industry, we have an expectation that you're going to give them a percentage. They don't owe you that money. So the question is, how do you get people to give you money they don't owe you? And what other circumstance would they do that? And so I started down this path and I started listening to what other servers and what other people thought about this. And I thought, well, I need to do more research. So I actually did a surveys. I think I went to AJ's and I went to Bash's and I started interviewing and I had a survey to get people to take about why they tip and what is their tipping behavior and what would make them tip less and what would then make them tip more. And I learned a lot of pretty interesting things about it.
And I will say we should tag the local hometown tipping app. Do you know Bravo? She created a tipping app because sometimes you'll go do things like valet or something and you don't have money. And so then those people are left getting nothing because you don't have something. So she created this app and I met her several years ago. I think they went on Shark Tank maybe. But anyway, so maybe we'll tag her because maybe we'll have a follow-up to this and she can give us her perspective. But I think your data is relevant. And I think there were some aha moments for me in reading it because I love this concept of, level setting to the place of what is good. So what are some of the big things that you learned in asking the questions?
Well, first of all, just to make sure we're not giving people permission to be bad tippers.
Right.
The objective is to get people to get the most out of their tipping dollars, to get value, to see it as a value proposition, right? And that, you want to, and the question I would ask myself is, as far as people leaving tips for bad service, is what else are you willing to pay for that you don't get? Which I think is an amazing point in the business. If you don't get good service, or you don't get service, or you have a waiter who is giving you bad service or annoying or anything, why are you tipping them? If they burned your steak in the restaurant, would you pay for the steak?
Yeah.
What else are Americans willing to pay for if they don't get?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, because it's like, what's your reasonable expectation for what you're receiving? If you walk into a restaurant and you're paying for the item that's on the menu, I think it's reasonable to expect that they're not going to require you to walk back into the kitchen to grab that item, off the pass-through window and walk it back out to your table so you can sit down and eat it. I think that's a reasonable expectation. If that's your definition of service, if you sit down at a restaurant and you think that because somebody walked a plate of food out to you, that's a reasonable expectation that was exceeded, and you're tipping based on that, I think we've like you said, Stacey, we got a level set sort of what is the definition of service here? Because I know that the restaurant has baked into their food costs the item that I am buying off the menu. They're covering the overhead of the person that is walking it from point A to point B.
And you brought up an interesting term, which is expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and a lot of restaurants use the term exceed the guest expectations, which I really hate, because if I go to Applebee's and I don't get food poisoning, they just exceeded my expectations.
Well, and it makes this assumption that we know what somebody else's expectations are.
Yeah,
right.
I don't see that as the bar. I see that as a very low bar, is to exceed my expectation, because my expectations are pretty low.
And I will say, when you work in this industry, we've all been there, right? I think I tend to be more practical. So I do vary. So if I'm getting takeout food and I know this poor kid had to wrap up my stuff and bag it and put the da-da-da-da-da, I do tip because I feel like there was a service provided over and above if I was eating in the restaurant, right? So if I was eating in the restaurant at a counter place and I wasn't going to tip, I do tip. I will say I told you guys the story when I was waiting tables way back and I pulled a double. It was a Saturday. I worked brunch and lunch, morning brunch and lunch that day. And so went home and then we were going out that night and I had the worst service. And the guy wasn't just bad service. Like, you know, when you work in industry, if somebody's just slammed and just in the weeds, you can see that, like sat 4 tables at one time, whatever, you have compassion. So I think if you work in the industry, you have compassion for people too. But at the same time, when somebody's just straight up a jerk, I left $0.
Thank God. Because I have to tell you, as somebody who really took service seriously when I was working, I would be offended that you gave that guy money.
Yeah.
You know, but to equalize it, don't give him any money. But next time I wait on you, double my tip.
Yeah, exactly.
You're equalizing the value you're getting for your money, but you're giving it for good service.
And that person that's getting double the money is more likely to stay working in that job. I think I love what you said about capitalism. I also think it's kind of like natural selection of talent.
Oh, yeah.
If we continue to pay people that are super crappy at service jobs, then they're going to continue to be super crappy. So one of two things happens if they don't get tips. They change their behavior and they start to give better service, or they stop doing this for a living.
Right. Go to work at Marshall's folding shirts in the back.
My son is a great example. He works at a food place. He ran the register for a little bit. He does not like people. And so they figured out, I think one day he pulled a shift as washing dishes in the back, and he was happy as a clam. And I think they were like, ding, this kid is much better served in the back of the house. And so now he's the sous chef and he's in the back and he loves it. He comes home, he's not drained and irritated, and he has to deal with the people that are with him, his coworkers, but not public. So I think it does create a selection of talent.
Right. And when you think about it, if this is all the case, then service is a competitive sport.
I like that too.
And if you're not willing to live up to that, if you're not willing to be a competitor, then get out of my way. Because you're going to get great service if you give tips proportional to the quality of the service you agree. And when I did the survey, Stacy,
yes,
almost 20% of the people said that they would never, ever, ever, ever leave a 0 tip.
I believe that. I think people are afraid to do that. But why?
Why? What are they afraid of? Somebody's going to chase them out?
Well, I think it's because somewhere along the way, the amount that you write down on that line on the receipt is a reflection of you, and not a reflection of the server.
Right, and that's why it's important. When I stiff a waiter, I write bad tip from good tipper on the check.
I'm going to start doing that.
Or no tip from good tipper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No tip from a good tipper, or bad tip from a good tipper.
Exactly.
So Tom, I'm curious about this. This is irrelevant. I mean, it's not focused in on the exercise of tipping, but I'm assuming you've traveled abroad several places.
As a matter of fact, I was a bartender in Madrid.
Okay. So I'm not pretending that I know all the places, but I do know that tipping is not... it's not all over the globe. In some places, it is actually very frowned upon if you try to give someone a tip.
Right.
And they have a completely different view of
and they have completely different service
profession. And that's what I mean. So it is a profession in some places in the world, and they're compensated by their employer for delivering a level of service to the customer. Right. It's only uniquely, to the restaurant and maybe hospitality industry and a couple others that it'd be hard to apply it. Your grocery store was a great example. It'd be hard to apply it to another industry where you say, you know what, I've got this checkout, person at the grocery store, and I should pay them $12, but as an employer, I'm going to pay them $7. And I'm going to expect my guests, my customers, to come in here, pick things off the shelf, fill up their cart, and walk over there. And they're supposed to close the gap for this employee. Why
And
do
I'll
we
tell
do
you,
that?
well, in Germany, when I went to Germany, they don't tip in Germany. And the service sucks. Like, you'll be in a restaurant and no one is coming. And you're just like, and when you're an American, you're thinking, what is happening? Germans think it's normal because it's all they know. So what we did learn is if you sit at a bar, you're going to probably get better service, and bartenders will take tips there. We found out. But you're just closer to them. It's easier for them, quite frankly, to get to you. But it's an interesting thing to bring up because it's very American thing in some
because
ways.
American capitalism
Yes.
is at play here. The better you do, the more money you make. I would say that a good service person at Denny's gives better service than most of the restaurants in France.
Yeah. My wife and I sat at a beautiful restaurant in Paris, and our waiter we were outside, and we had finished the meal, and it wasn't bad service, wasn't exceptional service. It's just whatever. But
They didn't care.
We're tourists. We're taking in the whole sights and the sounds and the smells and everything, and so we're ready for our check, and our waiter's 8 feet away from us on this outside patio area, leaning up against the railing, having a smoke. I finally catch his attention as he's been ignoring us for quite some time, and just wave him down like, hey, can we get the check?
You were bothering him.
He holds up his hand, gives me the hold on a moment,
please.
points at his cigarette, like I'll get to you when I'm done.
This happens
Been
at
there.
all-inclusives too, right? Because I think if you've ever been to an all-inclusive, now again, tip if you go to an all-inclusive, definitely tip the bartenders.
Oh, yeah.
They will take it from you and they will make sure you're well taken care of because you're not paying for your alcohol. But but I think it's another test of the same theory, which is in those restaurants, you're not supposed to tip.
When you think of this equation, though, when you think of this of capitalism and tipping and getting the most for your tipping dollars, then you start to realize that this is about psychology. It's about the psychology of service. Like, what is it that would make somebody want to tip you? And how do you understand the psychology of that? And so in this research I did, in these charts that I created and the surveys that I did, I was really looking for what would motivate somebody to want to give you more money than they would give somebody else, because that's the objective. And if I could teach that to servers, I could get servers to give better service and make more money. And the psychology is pretty interesting because I would ask servers, what would make you want to give somebody more money to you than they would give to somebody else. I would ask that, and the best answer I would get from somebody is they'd say, well, it's because they like you. They give you money because they like you, right? So the research I've done is, do you know the specific type of individual who makes the best tips in restaurants as a server? What specific individual do you think makes the highest percentage of their tips?
So I think I would say, so demographically, I would have to say it's an attractive female, but I also think there's a personality element to it of, what's the word I was trying to say, like lively, energetic.
You're going to know this when I tell you, but the servers who make the most money are pregnant women.
Oh, yes, I have.
Right?
Yes, I have.
And so I
seen
recommend to all of the waiters that I work
go
with,
get pregnant.
Go get pregnant.
Yeah, just
because
Good return on investment.
and
not
when
really.
you think about the psychology of
not
that,
really.
why is it that people love tipping pregnant women at restaurants?
Because they're working so hard, right? And it's kind of like the holiday thing again, right? Like, don't you
Yeah,
feel
but the
like,
psychology of it is because it makes them feel good.
yes. Well, that's why anybody does anything, by the way. Yeah.
It makes them feel good.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've come to understand is that people want to feel like they're liked, right? And the truth is, the waiters who make a lot of money don't just make you like them, but make you want them to like you.
There you go.
Right? And if you can get the customer to want you to like them, you're going to make a lot of money. And so I ask questions about why would you want the waiter to like you? Because the fact is it makes you feel good about yourself if the waiter likes you. One of them would be because you're going to come back and they're going to serve you again. It's about feeling a sense of appreciation. It's like feeling this is where, but at the same time, I've worked in, I love going to the casino and I'll tip. And sometimes they don't even look at the tip and they just stick it in their pocket. No, I want to be acknowledged as a good tipper.
Yeah.
And if I'm not being acknowledged as a good tipper, I just wasted some money that they shoved in their pocket that they're never going to know that I
gave them.
That I gave them. Mm-hmm. The art of service is also the psychological ability to make people feel good about giving you money they don't owe you. And this is the part that's missing.
That's the smiley face of the Dutch Bros.
It's a smiley face versus the X.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's true. And I do like Dutch Bros. Like I said, it's the only non-full service place that I tip. But
and here's a concept I would we can discuss, because I think the art of service, as you put it, Tom, is so beautifully said, because it is. I think all of us that have been in service, you start off bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. You're going to change the experience for everybody that comes in contact with you. You watched a training video, you had a good manager, whatever it is. You're ready to set the world on fire when you enter that industry. I highly doubt many people on their first day of starting their first job in the service industry just go into it with like, I hate people.
Yeah,
maybe my son.
Possibly. But here's what I'm saying though. So what happens to them over the course of time? We put so much on these service individuals for providing good service, but there's an element of this that as a consumer we have to take responsibility for, because nothing kills the inspiration behind somebody who wants to provide service by providing that service and just being exceptional and then getting stiffed and doing it again. And I'll give you an example of a story. So I used to, at one of our local casinos and resort entertainment destinations here in the Valley, managed a staff of valet and bell staff for the resort. And I would watch these guys, myself included, just 110 degrees, middle of summer in Arizona, sprinting down to the valet lot, pulling that car around, opening up, literally hopping out of that driver's seat, sprinting around the car, opening up every single door for everybody, sprinting back around the car to go over to the driver. And the driver goes, hey man, sorry, they took it all from me inside. Well, really? The casino took it all from you, huh? You didn't give it to them. You couldn't have set aside a five spot. And it's the same car that when they get in there, they go, hey, you know what, man? I'll get you on the way out. But these guys work a shift long enough. Sometimes you're in the casino for a few hours. And this is a very specific example. It's not a restaurant experience. But, sometimes you're in there and you're seeing the same guy in as the same guy out. And you're fooling yourself if you don't think that guy remembers you.
Okay, but think about it from the standpoint of my presumption that a good tip is more money than they would have given another server, right? If that's the case, then you're not going over after a big tip. You just want them to think about what they want to tip you and want to tip you more. So, this is a problem that I have, because some groups of people have bad reputations. And by the way, I'm sorry.
It's women.
Women have bad reputation for tipping. And the idea is to get them to be the service people to challenge, to get you to want to give them more money than they would normally give you. So if they normally leave a 10% tip and they give you a 15% tip, you just got a good tip.
Pretty good, yeah.
That's a good tip. It's
so what's
more.
the takeaway? First of all, ladies, step up your game per this conversation.
Well, not just ladies. I think that last part you said there, Tom, and to tie off my story too, if you are a consumer who has no intention of tipping, has no intention of even being a good tipper, you have no desire to do that, guess what? Don't fucking use the service. Yeah. I'll tell you right now, I don't care what it is. You're going to a restaurant, you're going to park your car in valet, you're going to have them bring your bags up to your room, you can go on and on. You're going to go to a salon and have them cut your hair. I don't care what it is. If you are the type of person that has no intention, that you do not think that you have to pay for service, then do not consume the service. The server should get pregnant. Or the server should get knocked up. Not by you, the consumer.
Or
that's a sexual harassment.
Or you should,
go back to the last episode.
You should give people a reason. You should explain to people, they say, hey, thank you very much. You're like, hey, I do this for a living. Or, this is how I'm putting myself through college. or, I'm trying to take a trip to Europe.
Yeah.
Just connect with them in
Yeah.
some way to make them understand that this is what you're doing for a living.
I know what you're saying, Tom. I gotta be cautious though, because I think people have tried that over and over and over again. Where as a consumer, you're like, really? So your girlfriend's pregnant with twins, and one of them has a congenital heart defect.
Well, you know what the best answer is?
I have had every story laid upon me. I've had guys on my staff back. I mean, this is 15 years ago, and I still remember the stories these guys would come up with trying to get a better tip. Not going to throw anybody under the bus, but every time they would come back, I'm like, look, you're going to go back home tonight with a pocket full of cash, but you're not going to feel good about it.
This is not the problem, because
maybe they did.
Those people who don't tip for service, just move on.
Yeah.
Move on to the tippers and try to get the best tip. Continue to give good service, because that's who you are. And eventually you'll get more. All I want to do is I want to make more money than other people who do what I do. So here's what I try to teach people. It's very simple rules. First of all, if you, figure out what a standard tip that you think you should be tipping across the board. And I'm talking about full service, figure out what that standard tip is and understand that this is where you're going to be eventually overall. If the person who's serving you does anything to make your experience worse than if somebody else would have been waiting on you, don't give them a tip, or maybe 10%.
Reduce
tip.
it, yeah.
Yeah, just reduce it. Because they're wholly responsible for the quality of the product that they're serving, which is the service is the product, right? So don't give them anything, I think, right? If the server does anything to make your experience better because they were serving you, then take that money that you were not giving other people and give it to them, right? And that way you're rewarding those people. And maybe those people who are giving bad service will go to work at Marshall's folding shirts, and good people will stay in the industry. It is a Darwinistic thing.
Yeah.
And I want to give people permission to stop tipping for bad service and then start rewarding people for giving good service. Use your tipping dollars effectively, intelligently, and I
love this.
And you'll get more out of it, and you'll feel better about it too.
I love this, Tom Frank.
I wish more people would understand that we can talk about this. And not only that, but don't be afraid of a person who just gave you bad service because they're going to chase you out. They're not going to chase you out. They're going to lose their job if they do that.
Well, and I think it's a good level set right now, and I think it's timely. So Tom, you're always amazing. You always bring really fresh, incredible, relevant, simple things to the table. So we're grateful for you. And
you said that this is the last for the season.
It is.
And you're going to go away. Could you, as long as we're still here, could you give everybody your address so that everyone can come over to your house and say hi during the summer?
No.
Oh.
But
address of the studio.
Bear might.
They can come say hi to
try
me.
to get you at my house. But you can find us on social media. You can find us on YouTube. And so please message us. We'll still be on all of those vehicles, even when we're on our break. And we're looking forward to formulating an amazing third season for you guys. What we will be posting out and want your feedback about is what else do you want to know about in season 3? And we have a few ideas, but would love to get your feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's similar to what we did between season 1 and 2. Stacey and I'll be still busy working away on how to formulate a better, entertaining and valuable show content for the listeners who have been here, and hopefully the listeners who will join us.
And maybe some swag.
We've been working on a little bit of swag for our OAF community. So
you can get optimized AF is where we're going with that. So thank you again, Tom, and we will, I'm sure, see you back.
Can I come back next season?
You should come back. You're a regular.
We don't have to talk about anything important. We could just
official.
talk about stuff like dipping.
We could. We could talk about red and green lights too.
Oh, yeah.
We could. So thank you guys so much for another amazing season with Optimized AF. And life is hard. We make it simple. Keep it simple every single day and stay motivated this summer to build great habits. Have a good one. Hey guys, thanks for listening to our show. You can find Blake and I on social media channels at Blake Greyhans and at Stacey Mallon.
Be sure to follow Optimized AF on Instagram and rate and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. See you next time.